I had heard of the Hanging Hills of Connecticut long before I ever set foot among their strange basalt cliffs. There is a starkness to the way the ridges rise from the landscape. Jagged black stone, carved by ancient lava flows and glaciers, layered like broken teeth, jutting skyward. Travelers once wrote of the place in almost reverent tones, describing it as both beautiful and oppressive. It was in those same ridges that people whispered about something darker. A black dog that appeared without warning, silent and watchful, pacing travelers along cliff edges and forest trails. I had read enough to know this was no ordinary ghost story. The people of Meriden had a saying, one carried for more than a century. To see the black dog once was good luck. To see it twice meant misfortune. But to see it a third time meant death. It was not said with a wink or a storyteller's flourish. It was spoken like a warning, heavy with belief. Some accounts called it an omen, others a spectral beast. In 1891, a respected geologist named W.H.C. Pynchon even wrote of his own encounter in the Connecticut Quarterly. He described walking those very ridges and being joined by the black dog, a small creature with cold dark fur, no sound of footsteps, and eyes that reflected no light. He admitted he felt no fear, at least not then, but Pynchon would later return to those cliffs, and he never came back alive. His colleagues wrote that he felt his death from West Peak, and many locals muttered that the black dog had been with him for the final time. That was enough to fix Hanging Hills in my imagination. I am not a superstitious woman, but the idea of a spectral creature tied to fate, misfortune, and death intrigued me. So one winter, when the skies were gray and the ground still hard with ice, I drove to Meriden to see the cliffs for myself. Before we get into the story, I'm Devin, and this is Porch Lore. Please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Enjoy the story. This is Porch Lore. And I'm your host, Devin. This is the tale of the Black Dog of Hanging Hills. The day began uneventfully. I parked near Hubbard Park, where a frozen pond reflected the ridges like a broken mirror. I followed the trails that cut steeply upward past bare trees rattling in the wind. The basalt underfoot was slick, with patches of snow, and I could hear my own breath echoing in the stillness. The higher I climbed, the more the world below seemed to fall away, leaving me alone with stone, ice, and sky. It was on the narrowest part of the ridge that I first noticed it, a shape in my peripheral vision. When I turned, I saw a dog, small and coal black, standing just ahead of me on the trail. Its fur was so dark it seemed to swallow the pale light of the overcast sky. The strangest part was the silence. No crunch of paws on the snow, no sound of breathing. The dog did not approach, nor did it retreat. It simply trotted a few paces ahead, then stopped to look back at me. Its eyes did not glint or shine, but they fixed me with a stare that felt almost human in its intensity. I should have felt fear, but instead, I felt a strange sense of calm, as though the presence of the animal was expected. So I followed it up the trail. Whenever I slowed, it slowed. When I pressed on, it matched my pace. It led me higher to where the cliff opened into a rocky overlook above the valley. That was where the storm struck. It came suddenly, rolling over the ridge like a living wall. The wind rose with a shriek, lashing through the skeletal trees. Snow fell in a blinding curtain, erasing the trail, the valley, even the horizon. I wrapped my coat tight and pulled my scarf over my mouth, but the cold was merciless, cutting into me like blades. The black dog remained. It stood at the cliff's edges, tail lifted, body rigid against the gale. It did not flinch when the wind howled, nor when thunder cracked like a cannon overhead. It merely turned its head, as if signaling for me to follow. With the storm closing in, I had little choice. I pressed forward, boots slipping on ice, until I reached the dog's side. From there, I saw a narrow path that I hadn't noticed before, dropping sharply down into the rocks. The animal bounded ahead, silent as ever, while I stumbled after it, half blinded by snow. The path twisted downward until we reached the mouth of a cave. I had not read of any cave in the Hanging Hills, but there it was, a jagged opening in the basalt, dark as a wound in the earth. The dog slipped inside without hesitation. I hesitated only a moment before ducking in. Inside, the storm faded to a muffled roar. The air smelled of damp stone and something older, something metallic and sour. I pulled out my flashlight and swept its beams across the walls. Basalt glittered with veins of quartz, wet with condensation. The floor was uneven, littered with broken rocks. And then I saw them. Scratches, hundreds of them, gouged deep into the stone. Some were claw marks, long and curved, higher than any dog could reach. Others looked almost like symbols, crude spirals and intersecting lines that made my skin crawl to trace. The light trembled in my hand as I turned in a slow circle. The black dog stood a few feet away, watching me. Its gaze was unblinking. And for the first time, fear struck me. It was not the ordinary fear of being lost or trapped. It was the feeling of standing on the edge of something vast and ancient, something that had seen me long before I saw it. The cave felt alive, its shadows thickening, pressing closer. A sound rose then, not from the dog, but from deeper in the cave. A low, resonant growl, so deep it vibrated my chest. It was followed by another and another, until the air seemed full of unseen throats. The dog moved at last. It stepped closer to me and sat at my feet, its black fur brushing against my boots. I felt no weight, no warmth. It was as if the creature were made of shadow. The growls swelled into something like laughter, harsh, broken, and inhuman. My flashlight flickered, and in that moment, I saw shapes moving along the walls, huge and twisted, crawling on limbs too long and jointed at impossible angles. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with light, but with absence, like holes in the world itself. I wanted to run, but the dog would not move. It sat like a sentinel, unyielding, while the shapes pressed closer. One reached a claw toward me, and the air itself seemed to tear where it passed. The storm outside gave a sudden, ear-splitting crack of thunder, and the cave shook violently. Snow blasted into the entrance, scattering ice crystals like glass. The dog rose then, barking soundlessly, and leapt into the whiteout. I ran after it. The cold hit me like a hammer, but I didn't stop. I stumbled down the slope, blinded by snow, guided only by the flicker of black fur ahead. The storm howled in my ears, drowning every other sound, until at last I burst from the ridge into the shelter of the lower woods. And just like that, the dog was gone. I searched, calling into the storm, but nothing answered. The snow fell softer here, muffling the world into silence. My flashlight revealed only trees, rocks, and the faint trace of my own footprints. I made it back to my car, long after night had fallen, shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I never told anyone the full truth of what I saw in that cave. I only said the storm had caught me unprepared. People nodded knowingly because storms in the Hanging Hills are unpredictable and dangerous. But when I read again about Pychon and the others who died on those cliffs, I wondered. I have now seen the black dog once. I cannot say if it was an omen of good luck or of something darker. But I do know this: if the black dog appears to me again, I will not follow it a second time. I'm Devin, and thanks for joining me, Porch Pals. For more stories like this, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. And remember, there's always room for one more on the porch.